Between the years 800 and 1000 AD, one of the most brilliant civilizations in human history simply stopped. The Maya had built cities with populations exceeding 100,000, at a time when London had fewer than 10,000. They constructed pyramids that rivaled those of Egypt. They developed the most sophisticated writing system in the Americas. They invented a calendar more accurate than the one Europe was using. They mapped the movements of Venus with precision that would not be matched for centuries. They calculated the length of a solar year to within 30 seconds of the modern measurement. And then, across hundreds of kilometers of lowland jungle in what is now Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, and Honduras, they stopped building. They stopped carving monuments. They stopped recording dates. They stopped maintaining their cities. Populations vanished from the archaeological record. Entire metropolises, Tikal, Copan, Calakmul, Palenque, were swallowed by the jungle within a few generations. By the time Spanish conquistadors arrived 500 years later, the great Maya cities were already ruins, buried under centuries of vegetation. For decades, the scientific consensus was clear and simple. Drought killed the Maya. Core samples from lake sediments and cave formations showed that the terminal classic period, 750 to 900 AD, coincided with several episodes of severe drought across the Yucatan Peninsula. The logic was straightforward. No rain, no crops, no food, no civilization. Case closed. Except in April 2026, a study from the Université de Montréal blew that explanation apart. And what they found suggests that the fall of the Maya was not a climate disaster at all. It was something far more complex and far more relevant to the world we live in today. Professor Benjamin Gwyneth, an expert on environmental change and its effects on Maya civilization, spent years analyzing sediment cores from Laguna Itzan, a lake in the Petén region of northern Guatemala, near the archaeological site of the ancient Maya city of Itzan. These sediment cores are like time capsules. Layer by layer, they preserve chemical and biological traces of what was happening on the surface thousands of years ago. Pollen from crops, charcoal from fires, isotopes that reveal rainfall patterns, and organic markers that indicate population density. Gwyneth's cores spanned 3,300 years of continuous environmental data, and what they showed was devastating to the drought theory. While Maya sites further north suffered catastrophic drought during the terminal classic period, Itzan experienced no drought at all. Its climate remained stable. The site is located near the Cordillera, a mountain range where atmospheric currents from the Caribbean generate regular orographic rainfall. While the rest of the Maya world was drying out, Itzan kept receiving rain. And yet, the population of Itzan still collapsed, sharply, dramatically, at the same time as everywhere else. If drought did not cause the collapse at Itzan, then drought cannot be the sole explanation for the Maya collapse. Something else was happening. If you are finding this mystery fascinating, subscribe to The Odd Vault and hit the bell, because the explanation that is emerging is even more unsettling than drought. A separate study from the University of California, Santa Barbara, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, found something equally surprising. They analyzed the growth and decline of multiple Maya cities and discovered that people actually moved into cities during periods of drought and conflict, not away from them, into them. The reason is economics. When the countryside was dangerous because of drought, failed harvests, or war, rural farmers migrated to cities because cities offered economies of scale, shared resources, organized agriculture, military protection, infrastructure. Cities grew larger during bad times because they were the safest option. But then came the twist that nobody expected. The researchers found that when climate conditions improved and the countryside became safe and productive again, people left the cities. They returned to rural life because it offered more autonomy, more space, and a better quality of life. The lead researcher said something that stunned the archaeological community. He said the biggest surprise was that the abandonment of cities occurred under improving climatic conditions, not worsening, improving. The Maya did not flee their cities because the world was falling apart. They left because the world was getting better, and city life was no longer worth the cost. But that is not the whole story either, because not all Maya cities were abandoned peacefully. Archaeological evidence shows that warfare intensified dramatically during the Terminal Classic period. Cities that had coexisted for centuries suddenly turned on each other. Monuments were defaced, buildings were burned, mass graves appeared. Trade networks that had connected cities across thousands of kilometers broke down. And once the network broke, the collapse cascaded. This is the key insight, and it connects directly to the Neanderthal discovery we covered in an earlier video. The Maya, like the Neanderthals, were destroyed not by a single catastrophe, but by the breakdown of connections. The Maya lowlands were not a collection of isolated cities. They were a tightly interconnected network, linked by trade, diplomacy, shared religion, and royal marriages. When drought struck some regions, it did not just affect those regions, it sent shockwaves through the entire system. Refugees fled to neighboring cities, trade routes were disrupted, agricultural surplus that had sustained alliances disappeared, wars erupted over shrinking resources, and as each city fell, whether to drought, war, or economic collapse, it weakened every city connected to it. The collapse rippled outward like dominoes. Even cities that had no drought, like Itzan, were dragged down by the failure of the network they depended on. They lost their trade partners, their allies, their economic connections. A city with rain but no trading network is like a factory with power but no customers. It cannot survive alone. The fall of the Maya was not a climate disaster. It was a systems failure. A civilization so interconnected that when part of the network broke, the entire system collapsed. And here is why this matters today. We live in the most interconnected civilization in human history. Global supply chains stretch across continents. Financial markets are linked in real time. A disruption in one country, a pandemic, a war, a drought, sends shockwaves through the entire global system. We saw it with the pandemic. We saw it with the war in Ukraine. We are seeing it with climate change. The Maya built an extraordinary civilization, one of the most advanced the world has ever seen. They mastered astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and agriculture. They thrived for over 1,000 years, and they fell. Not because they were weak, not because they were ignorant, but because the system they built was too interconnected to survive a cascading failure. They remind us that complexity is both our greatest strength and our greatest vulnerability, and that the most dangerous moment for any civilization is not when things fall apart, but when the connections that hold everything together begin to break. This has been The Odd Vault. If this unlocked something in your mind, subscribe, because we open a new vault every week. What they didn't tell you, we will.